My name is Era, and I'm the host of the Tamil Creator Podcast. I chat with creators from all over the world to share their stories and discuss hot topics in a way that I hope inspires, educates, and entertains you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Tamil Creator. I'm your host, Era, and today I have a very special guest. I've been chasing her for many years. I finally caught her. We got her in one place. So she's going to get a very long-winded kind of intro. Her name is Krishnan, and she's a globally recognized people and culture leader who has spent the last 2 decades shaping how some of the world's fastest growing companies scale their teams and leadership. From her early days as a culture consultant in San Francisco to leading global people strategy at TikTok across 50,000 employees. She's at the center of hyper growth. She's moving away from that. She'll kind of get into that later, but I think this is kind of important part of her story. She's helped companies like Trivago and Grab navigate rapid scale, transformation, and complexity across continents. Her story is very interesting because she started off in Toronto. She's now in Asia, and she'll kind of talk about that as well. She was born in Canada to Sri Lankan parents who rebuilt their lives after feeling conflict, and she has a really unique perspective on leadership, rooted in resilience, identity, and human connection, and something that shows up in kind of her work every day. Today, she's the Chief Culture and AI Transformation Officer at Hoogly. She's building an AI-powered culture OS designed to reimagine how organizations engage, coach, and lead their people. She blends executive strategy with breath work, behavioral science, and conscious leadership, and she sits at the unique intersection of technology and humanity. So today we're going to kind of get into all of that. So leadership, building culture at scale, but also really some things we kind of talked about just before we hopped on, which is how do you kind of live a life full of freedom? What does that mean? So I'm very excited. Anita, thank you for jumping on and sharing your story today.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ara. Yeah, I got to update my LinkedIn bio. There's a lot of things in there that, was a big part of my journey. And now looking back, I'm like, yeah, it got me to where I am now in terms of figuring out where my path can actually be, the impact that I can have. And it comes down to back into that consultancy kind of hat, back to working with companies to really solve for a culture. Because yeah, you've seen a lot of memes that come out about the dynamic between employer and employees. And yeah, we just want to make sure that that kind of environment is, yeah, you want to show up to work. You wake up, you're motivated to go into work. And so I'm happy to be with you today and share a bit about my career journey. And yeah, talk a bit about this concept of freedom and what does that look like, because that's kind of where I am at this point in my life journey, trying to scope out, what more can I do? How can I carve out more and more time to do all the things that I love? For example, writing. So that's how I'm spending my time currently in Asia.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's always about the beginning. So let's start with your childhood, your formative teenage years. Like, what was that like? And then we'll kind of get into the rest of your journey as well.
Yeah, so growing up, I was very independent. I kind of was just left alone. My parents worked three jobs, as new immigrants. And so very early on, I knew I need to excel in school. And I caught on early that if I did well in school, I could leave home. That was kind of the mindset. Like I can leave home and go away to university. And I picked out a university because I knew my parents would say yes, because my uncle had went there. And so it was all planned out, and I worked hard to fast track from high school. And so I graduated a year early from high school. My teachers all thought I was not ready for university, and they were 200% right. There's nobody should be going to university a year early. If anything, I should have taken a gap year and then went. But I did that. I did that plunge, took it. I did night school. My mom would make sure that I got to my evening classes on time. And I hustled hard very early on, seeing my parents do that. And I said, okay, I need to flip the narrative, do something different. A big part of my preteen was my grandma coming from Sri Lanka. She was an educator, and a teacher, an activist. And very early on, she took me to my first protest in Ottawa. That time was during Krishan, the situation. And what I really it kind of instilled that what I wanted to do later on in life, that I wanted to be in the topics of human rights, be working in this kind of journey. And I always thought I would be a lawyer, be a Mal Clooney before she married Clooney. But actually, I ended up naturally getting into the education of leadership and going in that path. But very early on, this independence kind of mindset, very high ambition, was kind of instilled on me just seeing how hard my parents worked. And that kind of just was my formative years where I performed and actually sent a picture of my childhood, my Parkland is where I went in Markham. I had all these perfect attendance award, the mathematics, the science, all these little cute little memorabilia that I had saved and my parents had at their house this past visit. And I thought with myself, it's like, yeah, that's who I was then, and kind of that ambition that took me throughout my life. And it was just early on, just seeing that you can do things independently and being able to put your effort, whole heart into everything that you do. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I know the conversation we had before this. Like, I think everyone knows you as you're this powerhouse in terms of like you worked at obviously all these very influential tech companies and high level roles. And obviously you've kind of flipped the script in terms of what you prioritize now. So I mean I guess part of that is like why don't we get into the whole topic of I think you describe yourself as a work futurist. So like
Mhm.
what do you think the future of work looks like and especially over the next like 5 to 10 years, like tell us about that.
Yeah, I think for me, the future of work, a lot has changing with AI, and I think the people who we've been, talking a bit about this quite a bit, but for me, the work futurist part comes where thinking about how you go to where talent are, not about building companies and everything can be easily HQ, San Francisco Bay Area. You can build everything from there, and you're going to be working with the same talent pool. You're not going to really be able to branch out and see many other talent out there. And so a lot has been changing around work moving to where the talent is. And when I say work futurist, it's more around looking at how AI is going to help amplify your role, not take your job away. And so it's this kind of notion of being able to build companies that are productive and efficient without leaving the humans behind it. And so I think this is the parts where injecting a lot more hope and humanity into the workplaces because it became a very toxic spot. Like especially in tech, it could be very difficult. And a big part of my roles, I've had to do the unfortunates of having to let go, do mass layoffs and things like that. And the layoffs weren't thankfully in the TikTok side, it wasn't because of industry or economics. It was actually geopolitical reasons. And some of these things just stood with me along the way that when I think about building companies, it needs to be people first. And with AI playing a huge role, being able to build things that nobody should be doing administrative things anymore. So you can easily elevate everyone's role, anyone who's hungry to learn and willing to step up and drive impact can have impact. So the way I look at work is what is this individual's impact that they can have in this organization and how can as a company replicate that, like be able to motivate them, inspire them to stick around. So it's all about retention for them, for the companies that actually care about employee retention. And for the employee side, how do we make it that you feel like this is a meaningful space to be in and work at? And I always tell employers, especially when I was interviewed, I'm like, oh, what would it take for you to stay beyond like 2 years? To say beyond 2 years, I drive impact within 2 years. Like it's known, like within 6 months, you'll see the impact. But the 2 year post journey needs to be, I need to be able to have slam dunks that I can achieve in the next 2, 3, 4 years. And so it's that kind of ambition where I flip it back to the employers usually to say, how would you retain? What are you going to bring do to retain? Not just myself, but all the high performers. And so this kind of work futurist topic came because, yeah, the companies have swayed away from that. They've lost kind of the trust between employees, and they're all struggling to retain their talent. And anyone who, you can get a flashy offer and move on. And so that's kind of the topic there.
Yeah, it feels like the pendulum has swung back and forth a few times. I remember like I
Yeah.
think during the peak of COVID, like it felt like things were more in like it felt like employees had a lot of leverage, and then it kind of quickly swung back, and it's kind of going even further now with kind of AI and again, obviously AI has progressed a lot, but there's obviously a lot of narrative that is scaring people beyond kind of maybe what the capabilities are today, or maybe I'm not as aware, but
Yeah,
people get worried
exactly.
about
Well,
things like AGI and things like that. So I'm just curious
yeah.
about your thoughts on that.
So for me, like I think the parts where, if we look back at COVID times, we all worked remotely. And we did it then. And so to then like give so much trust and autonomy to employees and then flip the narrative and say, no, RTO, return to the office. We need you in 5 days a week, or even this 2 day a week thing. People are miserable going in because it's not about you can go in and have fun and do those kind of things, but that could be a quarterly kind of event. And with AI, I think it's this kind of the narrative came because everything came out so fast. And people didn't like people were using when, 2 years ago when GPT came out, people were putting all kinds of company data in there. And they were just, it started off all wrong. The launch of all of this started off wrong. And then now you see this different dynamic where people are like, oh, you know, we're all about Claude and Anthropic now. And so people have moved, shifted. They're all using their own kind of sense making out of which LLMs actually work best for them. What can they use it for? I love when people are talk about how they vibe coded their, connected their Aura Ring to their nutrition and their Strava or whatever cool things that people are doing, building their own health coach. There's so much to be done in this kind of space, and it comes back to a willingness to learn. And I think people who are stuck on this fear side or not sure what to do with AI are kind of going to be the ones that, yeah, like get left behind. And I think that's the catch up point is it's not about just using it to make your life easier. It's actually we openly talk about it. Like, oh, let me run this through Claude and see what comes back up. And the common joke now is when you send out a brainstorming doc, you see at like in a millisecond everyone highlighting the doc. You know exactly what they're doing with where what's going to happen. And so there's no point in brainstorming. I rather would send a document and say, look, Claude and I have brainstormed, and here's what has come up with. And then is there anything, let's make sense out of it? Is there more that there'll be context? There'll be things that, the AI doesn't know that we've tried before. And so it's a speed game, but that doesn't mean you do more. You kind of are more in a strategic hat. And I don't think the people that have learned how to switch on that part of their brain, that strategic capability, are the ones that are going to thrive. And this is where I keep telling people, don't just, like the GPT isn't like Google. You don't ask it dumb questions. You really need to put some effort into the prompts. And it could do a whole bunch of stuff. But you don't also want to be like, it's obvious. Like all of a sudden, I stopped writing on LinkedIn because all of a sudden everybody became a thought leader with AI slop all over the place. And I'm just, you know what? It's just flooded. Like no one's reading LinkedIn anymore. I used to go there for my, industry knowledge and stuff. And now I'm just like giving up. I'm like, no, anyone who's posting daily content strategy, it's just not, it's not exciting anymore. So I've given up on that front. But that's where I go back to pen and paper and write and then put it into Substack and try to make it more exciting.
So where do you go now for like your like industry knowledge or just like things that you want to read? Like where do you go now? This episode is sponsored by nobody. That's right, nobody. So if you could be kind enough to hit that subscribe button, that would mean a lot to me.
I go back to like read like honestly, if I could get a subscription to New York Times, I would love that. But like I would just honestly read online. I read The Economist regularly. HBR is always good to kind of like from like I feel like HBR used to be good, but I guess it's this point in time where I'm like, oh, I've done all this. This is no longer like I already know this kind of mindset. Whereas at least The Economist gives you a bit of the broader world perspectives, and I like reading that. And so I'm not one to read the news. I don't tap into the news regularly. It's just a lot of fear mongering, and it sets you off on a really bad tone. And so I rarely. Yeah, sometimes there's Al Jazeera blasting in my house, and I'm just like, I can't. I
Mhm.
can't work with this kind of thing. And it's also the news channel, right? Like you don't want to do a CNN because I know that's not going to be what I need to hear. So I go for different perspectives in as much as possible. But LinkedIn is not like podcast is another one. Being able to listen and just learn from others. And then a lot of coffee chats with really super smart people. I'm not afraid to ping someone and say, "Hey, I'm working on this. I'd really love to sit down with you, even if I can get 20 minutes of your time." And that's kind of been my journey of learning from folks who've done it before. And this was something I learned really early on in my younger days, is you always want to one up your performance. And so, yes, I'm in grade six, but I need to be performing at a grade seven level. Like, I don't know how it got programmed in my brain like that, but that stood like when I got my first job, I'm like, cool. And it made it very, University of Toronto made it easy for you to see the leveling. So in order for you to make that next jump, you would need to do the following in the job descriptions. And I would make sure I'm already performing at that level to be able to, so that the promotion would be very obvious. And it was just these kind of little things that stood with me, and I just kept going. And then meeting with people who've done it before, in terms of forms of mentorship. And then I paid that forward back to other folks who reach out asking for mentorship or some time for advice. If I can find that in my LinkedIn maze. Yeah, when I used to hire, my LinkedIn would just be flooded with CVs, and so I would find it hard to really be able to reach out, like talk to people. Um, but if someone introduced me to someone else and said, "Hey, they could really use your time, your experience," and likewise other people making those intros too.
So I had a question for you. I know you're all about people and like obviously how to navigate this new kind of future. How do you feel when you hear about people that, they're building billion-dollar companies with like it's like two people with like a bunch of agents and using AI to kind of do that, and that's what people they're like, oh wow, that's so efficient. It's like $50 million like an employee because there's two of them. And there's obviously AI is about efficiency and maybe kind of like you said, putting on that strategy hat. But when you hear
Mhm.
stuff like that, how do you feel and how do you quell people's fears about that? Like or your team? Yeah, just curious about that.
It works, right? Like that two-person company, they're proving that they're working. I would say the magic number is 12, not two, just to have, a little bit of a balance. But that is the future where your teams, I wouldn't go to the extreme of two people and a bunch of agents, especially with that kind of dollar value at stakes, but it's more about any company that's existing right now. If you have your team and you've always wanted more headcount, you've always wanted, you need three more HR business partners, you need like all these admin off folks in the shared services. That the challenge back for companies is how do we create some, really create some agents that can actually support with this, take the heavy load off. I'm supportive of AI agents coming in for like the administrative pieces, the things that they can't mess up, the things that are repetitive, the scheduling, the coordination, the note taking. Like, I can't believe that there were minute takers in the past, right? Like, now everybody's on either Phantom or Clarify or like whatever tools out there. And so you want to think about what parts of a team do we need, like, yeah, the strategic teammates and also their agents. And I think, there was like I spoke at a conference about, yeah, they're everyone having their own agent that's acting like a second brain. And I don't think that's far from reality. Like I can go to sleep, have one of my agents working all night on something really cool. I wake up, it's taken me a bit further than where I could have done it on my own. And then I come in with, of course, my own sense making, my strategic capabilities. And so we're not far off from this reality. What's scary is the robots and like, this kind of robots are here, like this kind of notion, like it's almost these doomsday kind of movies that we've seen in the past where people are already thinking worst case scenario. And instead, you have to think about which companies or what are they using AI for. And I think even in this, like I'm reading Empire of AI at the moment, it's just fascinating to see like how this all went down. And if you look at it from a tech perspective, Careless People is another great one to look at how Meta came about. And when I think about, the use cases for how, whether how Gemini or Claude or GPT is being built, you also have to look at the people who are building this behind it. What are their employee base? How are they doing this? And so already you've seen it. People are saying, okay, I'm camp this, I'm camp that, and they pick their favorite LLM and are moving forward. But the companies that are already like there were a lot of companies that did this early on. I think it was already last year where they're like, we've gotten rid of our workforce and we're gonna have agents. And then the agents didn't work. Like it was too early for that. And then they had to rehire people back. Yeah, good luck hiring the people that you've just fired. They're not going to come back. And so when I say people first mindset, and if we had to let go someone or let go a group of people, I'm always doing it in a way that they're leaving with like, head held up high, and should we have something, they're going to boomerang back. That's kind of the mindset that I operate in, and I think this is where you need to be able to experiment. You need to be able to show what was, efficiency gains out of building those agents and how it contributes to the team's work. But it's not a replace all the humans kind of thing. And two is, yeah, two and a bunch of agents is it's not scalable in my opinion. It's not sustainable. But magic number of 12, I think would work. There's enough in there, guardrails being built that yeah, I would trust. If I was an investor, a VC, and that one person, two-person company came up, I would be reluctant to put my money on the table for that. But 12, I would do it. I would say, yeah, let's tell me more about these agents and what does that model look like? How do they orchestrate? Like what kind of, can they wear these hats? And so I think that's kind of the way to look at it. What is the purpose of it? Are they doing it because they're getting street cred, or are they doing it because it actually works and they're profitable?
I know you talked about like we should look at things positively, but I guess it's easier or not easier. I mean, it is healthy to kind of look at what is the worst case. Like in my mind, like movies that came out 30 years ago, like Terminator, and like there's another one
Mhm.
where you can like download the consciousness of somebody into like a machine. It seemed very far off, but like now it's like, oh, it's like years away or like it's almost there.
Yeah.
Not like Terminator, but like maybe like the downloading because I interesting case of AI is like, just downloading all your thoughts, how you think, and you can kind of leave it behind for like your children or like other people to
Mm.
kind of, use you as an advisor or skill like someone like yourself, for example, like your time is valuable. And instead of like having to do individual calls, you can be like, all right, this is how I think. If you want access, here it is. You can ask me all these questions. I'll update it.
Mm.
It seemed kind of crazy 20 years ago, but now it's like, oh, that's going to be normal. I can already see companies starting up to, like, that scale advisorship of like these smart people. So yeah, anyways.
No, I think you're right. It's super fascinating. Like I'm not haven't thought about yeah, putting my consciousness in like that kind of method, but I have st like I have like studied like my own brain waves and stuff during breath work, and been in geeking out in clinical studies of breath and how that copes with stress and in trauma responses. I've like geeked out about this for quote all of last year. And there's just so much that can be done. And it's as long as it's for good. Like I like that scenario of you're leaving this behind for your kids. You're leaving this behind for people who would have loved to sit down and have dinner with you. It's one of those things where you can actually benefit from. It's just I think it's not far off. It just has to be done with a great amount of ethics and kind of like your heart has to be in the right place for these things. And that's where, yeah, doing cool things like this is exciting. Like I feel like there's this amazing opportunity for everyone who, even if they didn't work in tech, there's just so much you can actually self-learn and do, and you're nothing's happening by like you can vibe code something over a weekend, couple weekends, and it doesn't have to be for mass use. It could just be for yourself and for a couple people to explore, and there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that going on, and so everybody's yeah, it's not cool anymore to say you've built your own app because I feel like a large majority of the population have now done that. And so back in the days of building with two engineers has evolved so much to say, actually, we can do quite a bit of that. Even with vibe coding, you still need the engineers. I know people are like, oh, we don't even need engineers. I'm like, no, that's not true. That you still need someone to be able to see whether that's been done properly. and that we're not fully there yet, where we can just say, "Oh, I've done it. It fully works, and it can be deployed." Those are the things that I think people are. When I consult folks, it's just their level of knowledge, and I'll just tell them, like, "Hey, you can actually hop onto Lovable." Like the easiest tool I'm thinking of that'll remove all the barriers. And there was another one that I saw recently that looks super cool. I can't remember the name, but you can voice all of this. You don't even need to type anymore. And it can build at least that first iteration. Yeah, the world of prototyping, all of this has evolved so much. And now when I think about how many weeks it took or sprints it took to build something, and now looking back, it's just there's so much more opportunity to do cool stuff. And this kind of the mindset I come in with, very positive. I think it's my brain has rewired a bit post tech or large scale tech to be able to say that innovation can be done in your own home, and it could be built out to inspire others.
Well, when you think like I think what it's done is open up the TAM of people that can now use technology without the constraints of money or connections. Like you think of like
Absolutely.
Replit or things like that, where now instead of like, you have like let's say 2, 3 million developers that are kind of the people that are the bottleneck. Now it's like, oh, if you have an idea, a strategy, how to get customers or a problem that nobody else really knows about, you can build out something quickly, then you can take to people that are a bit smarter or like, developers and flesh it out, which is like amazing. Like it's like when, the internet, like in terms of like websites and things came out,
Mhm.
it kind of changed like the TAM of like opportunity. Now so I get your point about thinking positively. I think that's the positive, which is there's a whole new audience of people that were limited by certain things, and now
Mhm.
there's more people that can get access to building out their ideas, access to wealth, access to people. So pretty excited about that. My question for you is kind of related to what you're doing with like at Hoogly, which is if AI we talked about downloading consciousness. So if it becomes really exceptional at things like coaching, feedback, even emotional intelligence, which I'm not sure yet. So what will remain uniquely human in leadership? And then kind of how that relates to what you're doing at Hoogly, which is AI powered culture OS. So like what is the problem that you're solving in traditional AR leadership? Or le what have traditional approaches failed to fix that you guys are fixing now with kind of this
Mhm.
new culture OS? I know it's a
Yeah.
long question, but yeah, I'd love to hear about
No, no, I think the biggest thing is like where we're looking in the space we're in is employee engagement. And employee engagement has been at a 10-year low for quite some time. I think only 20% being engaged. That's not okay. Like that's kind of how is society functioning if the key people of your company aren't even engaged. And so that's kind of the focus point. My background in leadership excites me because this is where I kind of have seen it unfold, where managers got training, where we're seeing it. It used to be first time managers didn't have enough training, so they weren't great leaders to manage teams, etc. We were taking individual contributors who were really damn good engineers and then making them a team lead. That's where things started breaking, where we started forcing people who weren't really interested in leading others kind of go in. And so what we're building with Hoogly is that gap between coaching, making sure that the a manager has a sounding board, a leadership, kind of like an executive coach at their fingertips. Executive coaches are expensive, it's not scalable. And so the way we do it is through employee engagement. We have a conversation, one-to-one conversation with employees. It's not a survey. It's not 56 questions thrown at you. Everyone hates those surveys. You kind of just say neutral, neutral. And then, of course, HR from my side, I have to pull everything together and come back and say, we're going to commit to these three actions if I get lucky with bringing everyone together to decide on what we're going to work on. And with Hoogly, we're eliminating that completely. We're having the one-on-one conversations. We're taking, this could be, like 15,000 person organization. All that raw conversation is then taken into insights to be able to say what's working well, what's not. Here are the things that feedback. And then we take it another step further. We say, here are agents who are going to help you with getting actions planned and done. And so with the managers, they get a coach right away to say, hey, these things came up on your about from for your team specifically. Here's a quick win, here's a midterm, long term. and they commit to which actions they want to take. And so it's simplified in a way that they have a coach at their fingertips. For employees, it's more of an accountability buddy. If you said my manager sucks, you can't just leave it at that. And in the old days, that's what happens in the survey, and then you kind of are off the hook. We're now saying, employee, hi, John, you mentioned that your relationship with your manager sucks. Let's help you prepare for that next one-on-one. Let's make sure you have, XYZ prepared for that next meeting next week at 11 a.m. with your manager. And similarly, in the manager side, we're saying, hey, John has these questions that really wants clarified from you. Can we? And so it's more of a bridging the gap, but it's not replacing the manager-employee relationship. So the human side of it is still very much there. The manager still needs to be there, convey the trust, convey all the right, say the right things so that John feels heard and listened to. And so that's kind of what we're building in that sense. And so when we zoom out for HR and the executive team, they'll be able to see, okay, which teams are actually performing well, which teams are struggling. And that's where I'm fascinated about organizational health. And, you might see a super highly engaged team, but their performance isn't that great. That's a misalignment with the company's goals, and they just not they're all like, we can retain them, they're amazing, they love what they do, but they're not meeting the targets that the company has set out. What's happening there? Is that a leadership challenge? Have they not heard about what the priorities are, versus a team that's disengaged but performing at a high level? That's where you see the burnout and things like that come out. And so it's a combination of looking at employee engagement, sentiment, and also all of that, the coaching element, the action planning with agents that help to execute on some of the challenges that have come up, and then the different hats that is worn. So for me as HR, how I would receive Hoogli's side of it would be a McKinsey consultant going through org diagnostics, whereas as a manager would get an executive coach, employees get more of an accountability buddy. And so it's been fun building this out. This is the third pivot. We've had other iterations before I joined the founding team. And so it's fun to do this. And I've built out my own products before in-house for Trivago Grab. And it was around 360 feedback. And that was a very structured way of, us giving 360 feedback to our peers, our manager, the other way around. And now I'm thinking about how feedback is given. It's not about the tool. I'm like, these performance reviews, getting feedbacks every 6 months is not good enough. And how do you build this cadence so that the feedback is done in a regular basis is kind of what Hoogli's looking at. So it's better relationship with your manager, better one-on-ones results in getting feedback on a timely manner and being able to act on it versus waiting for a traditional performance review, which I think is almost coming to an end soon enough.
Did you know that every time you left a 5 out of 5 review for this podcast, a Tamil parent lets their child pursue a career in the creative arts? Okay, that's probably not true, but if there's a chance that it is, do you really want to jinx it? Leave a review. Do it for the young creative in you. So you've held senior roles at like TikTok, Grab, Trivago, not easy places to kind of land roles. It's like a two-part question. You can kind of answer it from different perspectives.
Mhm,
But like, how'd you get these opportunities? And like, if you're talking to somebody that's like, 20 years younger, like they're like fresh out of school,
mhm.
and it could just be like generally anybody, but also especially as a female in tech. If someone wanted to kind of accelerate their career without waiting for permission, like what are some tangible things that they could do that they can learn from your journey to kind of go and get these opportunities, especially like someone that came from Canada, which obviously like now it's becoming more of a tech hub, but you went global. But like we'll start with kind of, how do you find
Yeah.
these opportunities and how do you kind of accelerate your career?
Yeah, I think the first like quality is this notion of willing to take a risk. So when I left Toronto, I was already working at the university as a leadership educator. It was very, comfortable job. I could have kept going in that. It's a tenured kind of role, but there was part of me where I wanted to travel. I wanted to just get out of Toronto and experience the world. And I think it was this first, when I mentioned that I was going to travel and then I'm going to find some part-time gig so I can spend time in Europe. And I was really nervous about that, letting go of something and pursuing something part-time when I have everything. Like it's this mindset where I had to switch a part of my brain where I went in this with this mindset of having a beginner's mindset. I don't know it all. I'm here to learn. I want to try this out. And so Trivago was complete accident. It was I literally I think the first opportunity was something in SEO marketing. They needed an English speaker in Germany. And it was like a part-time gig. I think it was like something like €8 per hour or something. And this is like well into, I've already worked for 10 years. So you can imagine that kind of mindset shift that was needed. And I met the CEO during onboarding. I said, I'm a leadership educator from Canada, and I'm traveling through this. I'm traveling and I wanted to experience Europe. But like he caught on to the part where I said I was a leadership educator, and now here to do SEO link building. And he pulled me aside and said, like, "See, this is why I need people like you lead like managing first time managers because look, my HR team has just hired you for a random role when they should have created a role for you that was training the first time managers. Like we need a leadership educator and you're landing in Germany and they've just hired you for some random role." And so it kind of we had this conversation about how do we do more of this, hire really brilliant people that can be versatile in different roles. And so that's how that kind of role started. But if I take few steps back without how I got my first job ever out of university. I was volunteering in at the University of Waterloo. That's where I went. I was in student leadership. I was in that kind of area for quite some time. I made sure that I was a don in residence and things like that. And those kind of leadership capabilities, paraprofessional kind of jobs got me my first job. So I didn't end up going to law school. I went straight to work at McMaster. From Waterloo, I went to work at McMaster, and that was because as a volunteer, as a paraprofessional, I gave it 200%. I showed interest. I looked up to learn from my leaders, that the people that were leading me. I asked a lot of questions. And every time I took a risk, I took a chance. And not many people, but like we have a lot of this where like, oh, I only want jobs in Toronto. And I don't know where it came from me that I can apply for a job in Waterloo or like McMaster. It's just I find that we're constricted to where we live and comfort and all of that. And so I'm glad I took that plunge to go to McMaster to do that role. And then I knew eventually I would get a job at U of T. But before I got to U of T, I needed to have other universities on my track record. So I had Waterloo, I had McMaster. And then getting a job at University of Toronto was a no-brainer after that. It came easily once you're in that kind of space. And so for me, it was again that kind of mindset of how do I do better? How can I do this and that? I found Toronto working in Toronto was the hardest, where when you're in Toronto, I was doing a lot of things other than just my job. So it's really easy to burn out and do like I cut out all the family stuff. I just wouldn't go out. I was more engaged in the community. And so I had a little bit of a kind of a rhythm going. But when I worked outside of Toronto, it was just my work. I was laser focused. That's all I had. And then I had some free time to learn. That was another thing I also did. I took opportunities where if the company had an educational benefit, I took that opportunity to take those to do more education. And so everything that you see other than Waterloo on my LinkedIn is free education. Like I milked it. Like I was like, I'm going to night school. Like I worked 7:30 to 3:45, went to yoga at the Sivananda Center in Toronto, and then went to night school. And I that carried that on even when I was working. And because this opportunity of getting education for free was this concept that I was just like, what? Why wouldn't I? Like it was felt like a no-brainer. And I know a lot of people don't use their credits. They don't utilize these things because yeah, they want to party instead. And I think those kind of seizing those opportunities, anything that was given to me, rewarded, I took with like I was really valued that. And so Trivago was kind of this playing ground. It was a really cool tech company that was in the middle of Düsseldorf, Germany. Like it's like it's not a cool city or anything. It was just one of those cities, and he was building a company that already had unlimited vacation. This is a 2014, unlimited vacation, full autonomy it was a 400 person company. And I just got to create like that. All my consultancy work that I did in Toronto just came to life in Germany, and they loved it because I had the North American experience. But I remember the CEO saying one thing to me. It's like, just one problem, Anita. You're Canadian. You're too nice. We need to bring in a bit of like German directness into you. And by the end of the 4 years, I had, moved into C-suite, and the culture at Trivago was, a current CEO right now to this day. He was a former intern in the company. So you can imagine like that kind of track record of growing talent within stood with me, and it spoiled me for lifetime. Because then I landed in like part of that journey of being in Germany, taking that risk. It was year four was coming up. And it was actually a friend of mine from Toronto. He's an author and a global speaker, Hamza Khan. I had him invited him to speak at Trivago, part of our speaker series. And he came and we were at a cafe and he said, Anita, you've done remarkable work here, from Toronto to Germany. Like, what's next for you? And I'm like, what's next? Like, I love what I'm doing here. He's like, but I'm sure there's this next itch. Like, you're really ambitious. And then I said, actually, and this was in 2018. I said, in 2020, I want to move to Singapore. And I was like, oh, Singapore, why Singapore? I'm like, oh, I really want to live in Asia. I want to be a global leader that has the North American, European, and Asian experience. And I'm just really, Singapore, like I want to feel like I want to live somewhere where, Tamil is embraced and you hear it in the MRT. My heart skips a beat. Like it's an announcement about don't eat in the train. It brings me joy because it's in Tamil, right? And you feel like it's a home. And so I said that, and he's like, okay, why 2020? Why not now? And that question of why not now actually I updated my LinkedIn. This was February 28th, like end of the month. I updated my LinkedIn. Believe it or not, March, I'm being flown into Singapore for an interview with Grab, which is Uber Southeast Asia. And it was just because of a conversation, updating my LinkedIn, and they specifically needed my experience in Singapore. And so I took the plunge. And even then I was like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if this is really a big adjustment. And even the hiring manager at that time, chief people officer, she said, hey, look, I know we're a Singaporean company, but you're getting an employment pass to come into Singapore and you can go to Facebook or Netflix, they're next door. And so she kind of like opened the door to say, look, if this company doesn't work out, you can easily be employed by any of these other guys. And I didn't have a job description. Like normally people wouldn't do this, just uproot without, it was a WhatsApp message. There was one line that said, I'm gonna head up leadership development and reimagine performance. It was a culture role, like a very vague description. And I packed up my bags and moved to Singapore. And I absolutely loved it. It was challenging at the beginning because I lost my Canadian nice, became a bit more German direct, and I landed in Asia, which is you need extra, extra nice again. So it was a big cultural shock. And I was really lucky that I met other leaders who kind of like embraced me and brought me in, and I had a great time. And those were kind of like the lessons I learned about like Asia. And when you go to Asia and you learn about what it takes to build a super app. This whole concept of super app was just like I was blown away. I was like, wow, the innovation here is something else. And that was it. I knew I'm not going anywhere. Like Asia is where I'm going to be for the rest of my life. It was so much conviction. 6 years went by in Singapore. Absolutely loved it. And after that, I didn't have to apply for a job. I got headhunted for these roles. And if I tell you about TikTok, like I didn't know TikTok was going to be what it was when I joined. Like I joined thinking I'm going to take a small gig. It ended up when I joined, it was 1,000. I scaled it up to 50,000 in that 4 years. It was insane. It was stressful. I burnt out, but it was also the best ride of my life because I got to work with the richest people in China. Like that's how I would describe the leaders. Like they're the most like the most brilliant and also financially very, very sound off. And I got to learn from with them it was a co-relation where they were have built something very unique and amazing, and they want to take this globalization. Like my job title was like globalization something something, and every time I asked about my metrics, there's like keep the global leaders happy. This is like the and I would spend my time, well, early days it was through live translation, because they didn't speak English, and I would spend 8 hours, be in 8 hour strategy meetings with my live translator and their live translate. Like it was just a live translation situation, and over the years their English improved thankfully, and things got better, but it was a beast on its own. And the dynamics of cross-cultural communication, geopolitical aspects. I got thrown into India because of the overnight ban because of the border tension. And I'm like, I'm not Indian. They're like, it's okay, you go. It's like I don't speak any of the like, and they kept the team would switch into Hindi, thinking I'm Indian. And I'm like, I don't speak Hindi. I'm not Indian. But it was fun to be in that kind of state where it just everything came all at once, and I was at the right spot at the right time. And my role there was to run towards the fire when everyone else was running away from the fire. That's how I would best describe it. So it was building the plane, flying it at the same time, firefighting. The tip we have a running joke where, like at Grab, I was Wendy Rhodes from Billions, the org psychologist, and like so I would get my friends would call me and be like, "Hey, Anita, I need you to Wendy me," and that meant I need to have like sit down, talk about performance, talk about, my next career move. And it was just such a great feeling. And then at TikTok, it felt like Olivia Pope. Like that was crisis management style. And so it was just these opportunities where I didn't have much time to say, I'm going to stay in my swim lane. This is my job. Like, no, none of these places had defined roles. I was actually building things so that other people could take over. And so I would hire a team, I would build up a team. The team's super excited to work with me. And then I'm like, oh, and by the way, this person's going to lead this team instead. And I would run off to the next thing to go off. And so I just kind of did it in a way that felt right. And for me, if I look back at TikTok, the legacy for me was we kept the employees on payroll 8 months after, the app went down. And so it had to be taken down. And no company does that, keep employees on payroll for 8 months. And then plus the severance that, when we had to part ways, giving them like a year's worth. And the discussion was simple. I said, hey, what's the budget? And they're like, hey, whatever you think will make sense. I'm like, well, I want to do this so that when we do get back into the market, I want every single person to boomerang back, not even have to second guess it. They'll come back right away. And because we were working towards coming back in the market. And yeah, so I got to do nice things. That felt really good to be part of a company that the deep pockets were deep. Wasn't a money issue. It was a true people first kind of thing. Did they work us to the ground? Yes. Is the Chinese tech culture, unreal 996? Yes. But did people like me feed into that because it was exciting? Yes. Yeah, no one, I could have been like my European colleagues and said, no, Sunday is my, day of rest. I am not coming. I could have done all of those things, but it was too exciting. You want to be part of the action. And so after that, I burnt out, and that's where I kind of said I need to take a step back, and this was a bit too much. And I had two moments in life where like two people close to me passed away at a very close distance. And that's where I started really saying, okay, wow, what would I change if I look back at learnings from their career? Like what have they done, their legacy that they've had, the cool things that they were able to achieve, what can I do differently? And so that's kind of where I took that detour of reassessing and doing things no, it doesn't have to be 996, it doesn't have to be hustle culture. You can actually build something with a really healthy kind of environment. And so that's where now the Hoogly part came in a very natural way.
It's amazing. I think
Yeah,
the,
long-winded, but at least you get the picture of how it all transpired.
No, I think you're a great storyteller, and I was just listening, captivated. I think one of the underrated parts I know is kind of a very small part of the story was I notice this generally talking to a lot of people that are successful is how quickly people to go from getting information that's useful and turning it into action. Like for you, like you said, you had a conversation with a friend about why not now instead of sitting on it like I know most people would and not do anything about it.
Yeah.
You updated your LinkedIn and immediately serendipitously got opportunities to kind of go to Asia.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that's such an
Absolutely.
underrated part of
It's like the
success. Yeah,
manifestation part, like
yeah,
you're programming your mind to think that one day I'm gonna do this, and then
yeah.
you just need a nudge from a really good friend, and he's a remarkable coach as well.
Money can be hard to come by, but here's a $100 opportunity for you. Join my free newsletter for free exclusive content and a free chance to win $100 when I hold special draws. Did I mention that it's free?
And that just, it's like you just have to take a step. And I think that's, as you said, people has like really are reluctant to take that first leap of faith. Even when I like, leaving Singapore to come to Bali, I had a very different lifestyle in Singapore, and like it's comfortable. You don't leave that kind of opportunity to come to Bali and just do yoga all day and run a startup. And I remember my yoga teacher actually who knew I've been like every time I was burnt out, I would come running to Ubud and go to yoga bar, check into, techaholics, burnt out tech folks. And every time he saw that I was trying to get out of that loop, that same loop, and he knew I would, and finally when I moved, he said, and the first thing he said to me is because he could see in my face, I'm kind of like probably like, what am I doing? I've just left my entire career behind and I'm here. Maybe that showed up in the way I was practicing. And he said, I am so proud of you for taking that leap of faith because I know you can kill it in Singapore. I know you can, if not TikTok, the next big thing. Like I know how ambitious you are, you can actually do that. But to say, no, I need to hit pause at this time in my life and I need to do this. This is what I need to pursue now. That takes a lot of courage. I cheered up. I was like, oh my God, this like he actually know he's like she's and every time he introduces me he gives a TikTok side and you can see the cringe in me because I'm just like yeah that's not like I'm here because I'm burnt out and I really need to recover and so it was I'm really grateful for people in my life that have taught me different techniques and different ways to kind of cope and do things but I think when you see people pass away and the kind of like like, and I was very fortunate to have one of my mentors. I met with him every Friday for coffee chats, and he would bring his 8-month-old to these meetings, and I would be holding onto him while he was sharing about his chemo treatments and what was going on and he ended up sounding like a sage near the end and everything about his last lecture like left a big impact on my life and I was like yeah this isn't worth it like what are we doing here we're hustling so hard and I actually need to put the speed brake, pause. I need to start writing. I need to start looking after my health. Like when I got to Bali, especially when I left TikTok, I went from strength training to not being able to hold dumbbells in my hand. Like it was that kind of the energy, the insomnia, everything had hidden at that point. And then I said, no, it's not going to be my story. It's not going to be my story where, I worked for tech bros and, this is where my life ended. Like it just was not the kind of the message. And so I reprogrammed everything. I took those risks, those challenges. And now there's Hoogly. And in my calendar, there's my paddle game is in my calendar, my yoga, everything is visible 200% in there. It's during the day. I'll even like have everything visible in there. And I do that because I want my team to also do the same things and do that. And so actually part of Hoogly it's super cool. Like I've considered myself now I'm a breathwork coach and that's the training I've done and really fascinated in this world of breath, somatic intelligence and everything. And I have a colleague who's a professional ballerina. Our VP product and design is a professional ballerina and she's actually performing in the Phantom of the Opera
Oh,
at the Sydney Opera House. And so I'm going next week to see her perform. But it's just we've all have our own passion and our own thing. And I'm writing, I'm working on a book. And in addition to that, we also pour ourselves into the startup and making Hoogly what it is. And I've never been part of that kind of work environment. And yes, I've scaled TikTok and Trivago and Grab and done amazing things. But actually, raising our first million through angel investors alone, that felt like a highlight, bigger journey than, yeah, scaling TikTok to 50,000. Because you do it with like a smaller team, a lot of ambition, and we knew what we were gonna do, and we all have our own different kind of roles to play, and I love that. I think that that kind of reframing of this concept of freedom, what does your impact look like in the world, and how you can do it without burning yourself out was kind of like my big revelation last year.
Yeah, we talked about before this jumping on about this idea of freedom, and I do want you to get your thoughts on that before we jump into the last re speed round, which is about the fun game. But with freedom, I think too, you had a couple of really good points, which often in conversations I have with people, I see the same things, which is especially North American culture, this hustle culture of like there's certain things you're supposed to kind of aim towards, like, and when you're kind of go against the grain, you get a lot of weird looks or like, why don't you kind of fit in? And people just don't have trouble understanding. Like, for example, I told you, my wife and I, we have two kids, we live in a two-bedroom condo, we share a car, like we try to live very simply, even though we could maybe live in a house, but it would be kind of like, like that whole thing of working hard towards this house that maybe we don't need versus trying to spend time, respect our health, respect, spend time with people we love. And I always got weird looks. So I'm curious about like how you define freedom, how you kind of deal with maybe in Asia it's a bit different, like especially in Bali where you're kind of living, it's the norm. But how do you deal it with when you come back to like Canada, you're visiting friends and family, and this mentality you have, you probably feel like an alien coming back into this very fast-paced kind of environment, North American culture. So yeah, just talk about that.
Yeah, I think like this concept of freedom, like it actually came in like got me how I started thinking about it was actually in a yoga class where it's a yoga class where the teacher is doing self-inquiry questions, posing it. And that theme of the class was freedom. And it was simple as what does freedom mean to you? And then like as you're flowing through the poses, you're answering these questions, you're thinking about it. And I started jotting down notes, ideas, mid-flow. And for me, it was just starting to think about breaking that down. How, like what would make me feel free? What's blocking me from pursuing this freedom? And it wasn't financial. Like I had already done all of this, but hadn't enjoyed any of it. I like, and it comes down to it's easy to do the comparison with the Robin Sharma's book on the monk who sold his Ferrari. Like it's just one of those things where all of these tools were there for us. I read that book in my 20s, but I still made those mistakes. Now I read it, reread it, and I'm looking at a rice field. And I'm like, okay, I understood the message. I got the memo. Like what I want to create is a simple life where I can put some stuff in the air fryer, make a beautiful meal, healthy, organic meal, read a book, swim, take a couple calls, meetings, my work days, make it productive, right? And it's defining that for your own terms. I think people are fixated that they need to have more and more and more and more. And it's easy. Like every time I come to Toronto, I can see everyone's working super hard. They're hustling hard, massive homes, mortgages, all these cars. Like it's just you live in a lifestyle that promotes that. And there's a lot of things around what people would think. What would people think if I did this? And once you start putting that kind of external validation into your life, that's when things go down south. And so for me, that topic of letting go of all that, it was kind of like, this sounds dramatic, but I did have an ego death experience. I did go through all that. It took time for me to go through those things to say, this is what I want in life, and this is what matters to me. This is the simple things I'm going to do. And how do I achieve that? Getting a remote role, like doing something remote. And like it's literally was making a list of things that was needed. And for me, the freedom concept is being able to design my life on my own terms, and living life much more simply. That means like making those sacrifices to say, I want to take trips to, I want to go to Japan this year. So this is how much I need to budget and save versus I'm going to spend that money on, getting this fancy car that definitely won't be able to drive in Bali. Like it's not one of those things that happen and you kind of switch to those circumstances. Here, instead of a Uber car, I would order a Grab bike. So a scooter comes to pick me up. Which is real, like I think that's freedom. Like my helmet, my hair blowing across the wind, having a scooter ride to get to my yoga class. But in general, like I think it comes into a lot of like making sure that you are unpacking what has kept you from taking that leap of faith, unpacking what are those blockers, barriers, and having a little bit of a sounding board and a team that kind of has that kind of checks and balances with you to say, this is what I've created. And other people have like, I know people friends who work super hard in a way they're doing multiple things but they're doing it as an entrepreneur so they are able to carve out all that time to still be there for their kids and do all that. So I'm not saying go be a monk in a cave in the Himalayas. Like that's not freedom. It's actually you finding that extra time. And I think time is the wealth here. Where every time, every moment, like now when I meet people or meet my friend or spend time with my godson, like I'm really soaking in the moment in a very different way. Whereas when I was working at TikTok and meeting people, I'm like, oh, hi, hi, hi. Oh, so good to see you. Okay, bye, bye, bye. Like that was like a quick hug and run off to the next thing. And that was not meaningful connection or creating community. And so now when I have these moments, sure, I'm like documenting, having fun. And so for me, when I look at these things around concept of freedom, like, my family jokes. It's like, oh, she's retired. She lives in Bali and she's retired. Like that's kind of the way they think about things. And I'm kind of just like, and people are like, what do you mean? You don't need to work anymore? I'm like, I do work, but it's not to the extent that I used to. I work part-time now and I want more time to write. And like people are like, what are you writing? Like this, I think telling people that you've taken time off to write, like it doesn't, I know as I'm saying it on the podcast, I'm like, I get it. I can already see my dad rolling his eyes, who's, instead of retiring, he's, onto his next business, right? They never knew to stop working hard. And that took a lot of time as an immigrant to let go of those things and kind of, define what does freedom look like to me. And that definition will look different for folks. But when I look back in life, I'm like, I've traveled everywhere possible. Like I only have two places on my bucket list that I haven't visited. That's already like, a big deal. And I utilize that when I worked at Trivago and lived in Europe. I traveled to every European city. I like explored everything. I love that. And similarly in Asia, I've been to every Southeast Asian country. And I love this part of the world. And for me, that exploration, that's freedom. And I did all of that while I was working. And now when I think about it, I'm like, no, I just want to be in a place where I can travel, I can write, I can tap into a creative side of me that never had time. I can attend this podcast, which we've never been able to shoot because I've never had the time to sit down and and the reason why I was always reluctant for doing like podcasts or any kind of things is because I wasn't even in a headspace to formulate sentences. I could do it at work in a very strategic way and do that, but outside of work, I was like, what if they asked me what I read? I read nothing. I'm like, I binge watched one weekend something. I felt very self-conscious about I am not seeing the world. I have no idea what's happening in the world. I've been consumed in this TikTok bubble. And of course, my family, she works at TikTok. Oh, that's so cool. I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not making dance videos all day. Like, it's not a cool job. It's actually a
Hard
difficult,
work. Yeah.
yeah, quite hard. Yeah. So that's kind of how I would like, it's a reframing of the mind, and letting go of what people think. What does, financial freedom look like? you can do so much with less. Like you don't need a lot. And you can go off to Malaysia, Thailand, any part of Asia. And it's a developing nation. It's not going to be, you're not just paying $20 for an Erewhon smoothie. That like you can really create something unique if you let go of those inhibitions that people hold on to.
Yeah, like when we did our family trip to Asia back in
Mhm.
January, um, I think one of the things is like the culture difference in Asia. Like, yes, it depends on which part of Asia, but we went to places like Vietnam, like Chiang Mai. We did Singapore as well, obviously, and like all the reasons you mentioned of why like Asia's amazing. Like in Singapore and Malaysia, it was cool to see Tamil like signs or like a ton of like Tamil restaurants.
Mhm.
And then like Asia, like in terms of like Vietnam and Thailand, the slower pace than when we did Bali like a long time ago. I think all those things along with like many. I think major formative kind of events in your life, like you said, your the death of like people close to your life, or like for me, I had my kids. I think the realization is like, and I think people find this hard to like sink in, which is like less is more, where you try to pack a lot of things because we're used to this idea of activity or productivity is kind of progress or it's positive, versus doing less is more, and like instead of like having 100 friends, like have like two or three.
Mhm. Mhm.
You don't need to like do all these things to kind of have fulfillment in your life. It's very much cultural programming. Uh,
Yeah.
so everything you kind of said resonated, except with like, I don't know if we'd ever like go and live somewhere else, but we definitely like every year try to go to somewhere and kind of slow travel and just experience a different pace of life.
Mhm.
And it's helpful to kind of remove yourself from all the cultural programming you're used to on a day-to-day basis. It does feel weird, like you're kind of like in a different place where you're not, jumping on a call right away. You're not rushing your kids off to school. And like, it's just like,
Mhm.
oh, you have a whole day to kind of really soak in every moment. So, yeah, no, I just love this conversation around freedom. So that's kind of a good way to kind of segue into kind of the final part of the podcast. So it's kind of a fun speed run. I didn't tell you any of the questions, but I think you'll do fine. It's a speed
Mhm.
run where I'll say a bunch of statements and you're going to kind of tell me the first thing that kind of pops to mind. Ready?
Mhm. Ready.
Awesome. Favorite Tamil food?
Kotrodi.
If there's a fire, flood, or like you just have not that much time to take two things with you, can't be people, what are they?
A journal and some essential oil.
Something that scares you,
Riding a scooter in Bali.
insecurity that you have,
Insecurity I have. Um, yeah, maybe my book about writing a book. Yeah, maybe that's why it's taking a long time that I'm not an author yet.
favorite show you're watching.
Favorite show? I'm not watching anything at the moment that's favorite, but Billions was definitely my
Great
previous
show.
favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Place you're itching to travel to. I'm curious about the two places on your bucket list that you haven't gone to.
The two places is Nepal and Bhutan, which are close by to me, so I definitely know I can go. But I want it to be yeah, like it'll involve a hike and it's a more of a spiritual would be a spiritual trip, so I'm excited to plan those next year.
Fellow Tamil creator you want to give a shout out to.
Ooh, Tamil creator. I would, I'm obsessed with Danush. I know he's an actor. I think he's a creator. His new song is on repeat for me at this moment. Like this is how still identify with, even though I'm out here in Bali, like listening to Tamil music and watching Tamil music movies is still a big part of my life. And yeah, I was telling someone the other day, I miss watching Sun TV on Saturdays with my mom because
Same.
there's always a movie that would play, and it was just our time on a Saturday on the couch watching like whatever movie that Sun TV was playing that day. And it could be a classic, it could be amazing. So yeah, as a creator, I think yeah, I'm really fascinated by him as a versatile actor, but just his music as well. And yeah, he's definitely playing different roles, and I'm yeah, I'm a huge fan, huge fan.
Favorite childhood memory.
Favorite childhood memory, my dad was a truck driver growing up, and he would take me and my brother when we had summer holidays. We would like ride on the truck to the US, and he would park in one of the truck stops so that we can go to Six Flags, and we got our all our clothes at the outlet before school started. And it was just a big childhood memory that I have of a big part of me that I still say, I'm like, we had to go to the outlet stores to get Nike for before school started. All right. So like I keep that in mind of how and where we've come from. And that meant riding on his truck. There was no vacation or anything time. But I still remember that as our holidays of seeing every single American state.
Wow.
Um, yeah, in bunk beds in my dad's truck. Yeah.
Your favorite movie of all time, Tamil, English, or both?
Ooh, favorite movie of all time is Alaipayde.
Oh, yes. Was that a Money River
Yeah.
movie?
Yeah.
Yes, yes. I love all those movies. Okay.
I've been sending my best friend in Toronto all kinds of music, and she's like, "What is this? You're in this in a different era." Which I'm like, I wake up, I play beautiful music on my Spotify. It's blasting, the sun is rising, so I'm creating a little bubble of romanticizing Tamil music at this time. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm going to get back to the speed run. Something you said about all you're obviously living like not the dramatic, but like the extreme end, which is like you've moved to a different place, you've created this life for yourself by making very specific decisions. Forgot to ask you in terms of how do you advise people in, like, say you're living in Toronto, how to create a mini version of that so that maybe they can't financially, or for whatever reason they can't do what you did. How do they do it like in their normal life? Like how do they create a mini version of that?
Yeah, like living in Asia is not as expensive. It's definitely way more cheaper than living in Toronto, but creating that in their calendar, like the time of like it take costs nothing to block off Saturday morning, wake up and go on a hike outside of, Toronto, or even just from Brampton to downtown Toronto. Embedding in the walks, their own time to strength train, go to a class, like getting out of like building those routines and habits is so important. And that's what I created in Toronto when I was there. Like I said, I went to the Sivananda Center in downtown Toronto to do my yoga. Like I think I was the youngest person there. But I loved that. It was my spiritual oasis in the midst of everything that was going on. It was, even when we were protesting on the streets, I still managed to take a mat and go and do yoga there. And that kind of being able to do these spiritual things amongst the chaos and noise is actually probably like primed me to be a lot more resilient in my career. Now I'm on the other side where I don't welcome any kind of chaos in my life, but I would create that intentionally, be intentional about creating those things. And sleep. I know people love binge watching a lot of things and try to run on less sleep, but it catches up on you at a later age. And so that sleep is gold. Like I have gone from insomnia to reaching 90s on my sleep score and really like it's not biohacking, but thinking about health as longevity, and what I need to do that. So everything I do from strength training and everything is from that perspective of being healthy at a later age, still being able to do all the things I love at 80, for example. Decision I've been putting off for a while. I can't think of anything other than yeah, reaching out to the specific publisher where I want to be further in my book before I reach out to them. That's the only decision, but I'm pretty rapid fire, kind of like I move really quickly. But that's the only one of yeah, I have a connection and I wanted to reach out, but I haven't because I'm just like, oh, I'm not ready yet. I need more time. Well,
Um, who's somebody that you would love to have on your invisible council?
yeah, I think for me, I'm actually fascinated by uh, Anjali Sood, who's the CEO of Tubi right now. She used to be the CEO of Vimo. And so why her is because just she's done it so early on as an entrepreneur. And there's a part of me lately that I've been thinking about while I'm in the startup scene. And someone asked me if I would like if I would ever step into that CEO hat at some point. And it's not a now topic, but it feels like there would be something of interest. And so yeah, she's pretty cool in what she's been able to build lately or
What's a
the
purchase,
past decade.
what's a purchase you've made that you splurged on recently in the last few years that you have no regret about?
Yeah, like I've splurged on a Hatch alarm clock. It's called a Hatch, and it's just a beautiful sunrise alarm clock. And then the Aura Ring, like these are things that I've actually it has a subscription, and I'm reluctant to go for things that have a subscription, but it brings me so much joy, and I'm like I had no regrets
Hmm.
on buying these things. So yeah, like I think my mother will roll her eyes if she heard my alarm clock was $300. Yeah.
A
Yeah.
pet peeve of yours.
Pet peeve. I think now a turnoff is like people who are cocky and like that for me is an issue. Um yeah, like I've seen it on the other side now of like what it looks like to be humble and what humility is like. So that opposite of that is not attractive. And yeah, like I can imagine parts of my career where I probably was, I know it all. I think I'm the best, but it's yeah, after that kind of ego death experience, you kind of like are actually the people that I gravitate towards are the most humble folks who are just kind of stealth, and you wouldn't know other than LinkedIn, you wouldn't know that they're highly successful folks. Yeah.
If you were going to die tomorrow, a regret that you would have.
Oof, if I was gonna die tomorrow, yeah, not having teleport capabilities, like not having that superpower to be have spent enough time with all of my loved ones. Because now I'm like, parachuting. Those journeys are tough. A 17-hour flight is no joke anymore, and so that kind of is my biggest regret of, that technology isn't it hasn't developed fast enough to have that bullet train or a fast
It's something
airplane,
brand
faster
new.
airplane. Yeah, something in mind. Maybe that's I would develop a way more competitor. Um, but yeah, that kind of is my biggest thing right now. And I can sense that it's something I make sure I do of every year. That I make sure like yeah, at least 6 to 8 months that I'm making sure I'm there in person with my friends and family. And that way, and that means because my time is so limited, even within 4 days, I make sure that those 4 days are prioritized for the right people. And everyone's just like, and then it was so nice because actually my friend said, I got a whole Saturday with Anita. Like it was just so, it was really sweet. They feel loved. They feel prioritized and loved. And like, amongst all the people I need to see, they got, Saturday. And sure, we went and saw Durender. Like we went and saw Durender 2 4-hour movie, but it was fun. It was fun to do, and yeah, it's just one of those things where I was like, it's damn cold outside, and my body temp like I struggled with the -6 when I came to Toronto. And it reminded me with like clear conviction I can never live in Toronto. Like it was just like absolute no. And it was just nice that time spent was quality, quality catch-ups, and yeah, my nephew and niece got to skip school on a Monday to have pizza at Badi Ali's.
Nice. A great
I'm the
spot.
cool aunt, right? I'm the cool aunt now, so I really love that. Like that makes me really happy that those are the moments that they'll remember. That they got to get cut school and have pizza at the best joint. So that's the meaningful stuff. Yeah.
Is there a book that you've read recently or a podcast you've listened to that's had a major impact on you?
The book that I am rereading is by Paul Kalanithi.
Yes. Great book.
Yeah, exactly. It's
I think it's something Final Breath or something like that. I forgot.
yeah, breath.
Uh,
Yeah, exactly. Like I had the Kindle version,
yeah.
and I bought the hard copy recently on my trip, and it's one of those tear jerkers, but it humbles you to like. I think that's the book I would recommend everyone to read if they're approaching freedom and trying to think about what's next and all of that and their own legacy. Like this is, like I said, I think I read stuff like that and I'm just moved by, like these are people of high caliber, highly successful, and this is their last lecture. This is their like last words where they're like pouring out their regrets and not being able to be there for their child. Yeah, I'm a highly sensitive person. I will like I have no problem bawling my eyes out at an airport on a flight, reading something or watching a movie, hearing even a song. Like recently the song that's viral on Pirangapani from you got to listen to it. It's a trigger warning there, but it's a 10-minute long song about he talks about a friend who committed suicide.
Okay.
But it's sung so beautifully. It's about like, it's just the friendship comes out. But the more you listen to it and like you get to this one part, and I've been YouTubing, like it's more than a movie. I've been playing that song again, and then it gets to your soul level. And I'm like, who is this? Who is this guy? I've never met this singer, but like, damn, this song has left
So say
people
the
in.
song again.
It's called Frangipani, which is a flower.
Okay.
And I think his name is Kabur Vasuki.
Okay.
And it's a Tamil song, and it's just so beautiful, 10 minutes. But everyone that I said to, I'm like, hey, trigger warning, by the way, but just listen to it. Like it's just a beautiful piece. And so I'm in that states where like I appreciate like, yeah, what does vulnerability mean? What does resilience look like? How people cope with grief? And then everything about breath mechanics. This is kind of what I've dived into. I've been really lucky to be part of a community here in Bali that does breathwork in a very somatic kind of way, and that's been a great healing experience for me. And then being able to work with others to also do that. So my breathwork clients are actually founders who are burnt out and insomnia and all of this, and we're unpacking. And so I knew I always wanted to be a coach, but the coaching has taken a very different lens with breathwork in mind. And I want people to have the tools that they need to not just have a coaching conversation and walk away, but have tools that they can self-regulate themselves and do. And so it's been a big part of my life, and I love that. Yeah, the type of coaching I do is in this space of making people feel embodied again. Yeah.
What's a belief, behavior, or habit that's improved your life?
Belief, behavior, I think it's just around sleep. Going to bed at a certain time, going to bed early. It's just helped me get the right amount of sleep, and then I wake up at 5. And this is a natural body clock. And, I mentioned my splurge purchase is my alarm, but I actually wake up before the alarm. There's no alarm. I actually don't have an alarm anymore, but it's more the white noise in the night and having that. But it's actually hacking the sleep, getting that sleep in order. And I do quite a bit to make sure that when I travel, I am able to, like this trip back, I didn't have any jet lag, which is a shocker for me. But I've been able to, yeah, without taking melatonin and all that, I arrived fine. Like I arrived because when I landed, I operated in that time zone. I made sure I didn't, crash and do all that. And so the sleep part is my biggest kind of habit, stacking thing. And yeah, people know to not call me past 8 p.m. because I'm already in bed. I got my skincare routine in, and I'm in bed with a book, and I'm ready to pass out. And so my mom won't even, she knows. She's like, "Oh, it's past 8." Like they called me at 10 p.m. or something. I'm like, I'm not. I'm out cold by then.
Uh-huh.
And so I that's been an important piece. And then just being able to wake up so early and having that moment of peace, watching the sunrise is kind of like my thing now. Yeah, I wake up to a volcano, overlooking a volcano, and it's just like I'm just blown away. Like when I see that, I'm just like, I can't believe this is my life. And yeah, I've created this, and I'm gonna, my coconut water is gonna arrive. No, these organic eggs from these chickens are coming, and like it's just a very yeah, different kind of lifestyle for a fraction of the cost that I've lived overseas, a fraction of it. And so I make it a point to wake up, watch the sunrise, and then I play a little bit of a role of a gardener and water the plants and greens. But yeah, it's just this mindset shift of getting your sleep in order is kind of the first step, and then everything else kind of comes in nicely. The clarity that you pursue your day in changes, and I think a lot of your people, because of lack of sleep, there's tons of other topics that come up, health issues, weight gain, irritability, everything. Oh.
Mm. And final question is, what is a piece of advice that you would give to your fellow Tamil aspiring creators out there?
I think for aspiring creators, yeah, like put your voice out there, create. I think we need a lot more unique perspectives to come out. And it's not always the loudest voices that get heard, or it's usually the loudest voices that get heard, but flipping that narrative for folks that like and then when I say creators, it's not just the podcast, the YouTubes, the being an influencer on Instagram, TikTok, etc. It's actually the writing pieces as well, the creative, the artists out there that are thing, even photographers. I follow so many photographers and lyricists, artists, authors. That's kind of, everybody has a kind of a story to tell. And it's really important to tell your unique story. Everybody comes from a very different place and finding that narrative and just putting it out there. And so, yeah, I write poetry and I'm like, maybe five people see it, but like, whatever. It brings me joy. It's less about, that's the thing about some of these social media platforms, having worked at TikTok, you kind of assume you need a following. And then I say, I built my career. I focused on my career. I built my career. So my LinkedIn is my public platform and everything is there. But unfortunately, what I'm writing and working on now isn't for LinkedIn. And so I'm on Instagram and I'm just like, this feels so weird. I'm not an influencer and I'm not expecting followers or anything, but you put it out there that maybe one person will read it and find comfort in that is kind of the narrative that I've taken up. So less about likes and followers and more about yeah, impacting people that you wouldn't have been able to touch in a way before. Whether that's through the writing, content you create. Yeah, like oh, the one content creator I wanted to shout out to was Sundar V.
Yes.
Um, that's yeah, and what he's done with his shows and taking a leap of faith. Like I followed his journey. Like I actually knew him before he was a comedian, and now I'm just like like I know my friend has seen it, seen the same video that has just come out, but I have to send it to her and I have to like we have to react and we have to have our moment about some of these things. And so I love that there are people who are doing this, putting themselves out there, exhibiting their vulnerability, sharing their qualities, their traits. And we need more artists like that to come forward, whether that's through humor or through music, art, all of that can be something that we can really all enjoy, indulge in a bit more.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Anita. This honestly is one of my favorite conversations I've had, so I'm really excited to kind of share it with the audience. So thank you for kind of jumping on. And so if somebody's listening to this or really inspired and they want to kind of connect with you, what is the best way for them to reach out to you?
On LinkedIn. Now I'm not hiring, so my LinkedIn inbox is actually manageable. And so yeah, I'd love to hear from people who've heard the podcast. And yeah, would just, really grateful for having the opportunity to speak, Ara. This was amazing. I'm glad we finally found time to sit down and do this. And yeah, I look forward to hearing from listeners who felt this was inspiring.
This is for my listeners. This is a lesson in persistence. If you really want to connect with somebody, follow up, obviously in a respectful way, because this conversation has been years in the making, and I'm glad we made
Yeah, I feel
it.
genuinely feel bad. Like I finally, when he reached out, I finally said, you know what? I finally have time. And I think I only needed to reschedule twice.
Yes, we made it happen.
One
I'm happy.
we made it happen. And yeah, it's I'm glad we finally did. And I think it was like I said, persistence. And I always replied back to say to
Yes.
like, hey, I'm so sorry. Now's not a good time. And at least I responded and didn't ghost him. But persistence is definitely key. I think yeah, always showing up, always asking is yeah, it's and I think people are it's not a rejection thing, but it's actually it's not about you. Like I think people need to, everyone thinks it's them, but I always tell people, look, it's definitely there's just a lot going on. The world is there's fires I'm putting out. And so yeah, even now, I'm also have a podcast for Hoogly, and I met with one of my mentors, and she was like, "I can't believe we're sitting on a couch having a podcast conversation," because both of us were firefighting, her at Netflix and me at TikTok. We never had time to do that. And since then, I've met her 3 or 4 times for coffee, casual chats. We've been having a blast. And I'm just like, why couldn't we do this when we were working like at some of these big tech companies? And so the persistence matters, but also like yeah, a lot people always there's a million things that are going on in people's lives. And I think yeah, reframing it to okay, there's just now is not a good time, but it will eventually happen. So I'm glad you reached out again and we made it work.
Well, to wrap it up, yeah, I think the connecting point to that is that's why I think sales is a very important skill for people to learn. Because in sales, you definitely learn it's not about you. It's definitely like something going on, like whether they're busy or they're it's not a priority. But it's not like, oh, they hate you or like they find you annoying. It's like just reach out. It doesn't hurt, but be understanding that you're not the center of their world. And I think like doing sales really helps frame that. So I think that has helped me, and I encourage people to kind of learn sales or kind of go through that training because it definitely teaches you that. So, anyways, thank you, Anita, for jumping on. And yeah, that's a end of the podcast for you listeners. Thank you guys for listening, and on to the next episode.
Thank you so much.